This video is about Alaska by Simon Armitage. Your first choice when you're facing a poem, particularly by Simon Armitage, is to decide whether it's autobiographical or whether he's simply constructed a character. Here, as in Hitcher, Armitage has created a potentially violent male character. He seems particularly interested in this kind of disillusioned and disaffected male. So the first question I'm going to ask myself is whether he's trying to represent aspects of masculinity. Is he writing about men in general when he introduces us to a specific character? If this is the case, then the girl of the poem here would represent a female perspective of masculinity. But before we answer that question, we need to look at this character himself. So you upped and went. Big deal. Now you must be sitting pretty. Now you must see me like a big Kodiak bear. I've read this out so that you can hear his sneering tone, and we can feel the anger hiding behind it. But in addition to that, we can see that his emotions betray him. When he says, big deal, he's trying to dismiss the fact that his girlfriend has left him, but we can see that it has deeply wounded him. So immediately we are presented with a character where we have to infer beyond his words and work out his true feelings even as he denies them. Armitage uses contrast. She is pretty by association, and he is like a bear. If you like, good versus bad. He argues that she must see him as like a bear, and perhaps his poem is going to be to try and show that he's not like that at all. There is more to him than she deemed worthy, and he's trying to protest that she shouldn't have left him. Girl, you must see me like the crown prince rattling. This simile of him as a crown prince is from her point of view. You must see me. And perhaps he imagines his past girlfriend focusing on his arrogance, and that's why he's like a prince holding a crown. And again, she's using contrast this time. Although he was like a prince, he's now rattling round his icy palace. This metaphor suggests how empty his life now is, now that she's left him. Although he might want to deny this view of himself, it's contradicted by the imperatives he uses. You must, and must again. And this repetition clearly signals what a dominant and domineering character the male persona is. So we have a character who does not want to be seen as this domineering presence, but whose very language reveals that he is this domineering presence. In other words, somebody that the girlfriend was right to leave. We return to this diminutive expression here. She's just a girl compared to his prince, and the contrast shows how little thought he has of her now, and perhaps did during their relationship. If you've watched my other videos, you will know that I ask you to consider starting with the title. I haven't done so here because it needs a little bit of historical context. Firstly, you need to know that Alaska was bought incredibly cheaply by the Americans from Russia in the 1860s. So we've got an image here of the prince losing his girl, and this suggests that she has been bought off by another male who appears to have a better deal for her. However, although Alaska is an American state, it is at quite some distance from the rest of the United States, separated by Canada. And this again gives the image of the separation he now has from his previous girlfriend. Alaska is also much smaller than the rest of the United States, and this subconsciously reveals how important his girlfriend was. She is like the rest of the states, and although he belittles her as a girl, that view is undermined by the importance he attaches to her if he is only Alaska. And finally, another way of looking at this is to see it as part of the frozen north, and so the character's emotions are frozen. He cannot escape them, and perhaps cannot feel love, and for this reason his girlfriend must have been right to have left in the first place. He is dismissive of the better deal she must have got with another man. She's gone for sick pay, wages, and running water. It's possible that there was no running water in the house that he occupied, but that's unlikely, and so this appears to be a metaphor for the restrictions that he must have placed on her. He's not allowed her much in the way that would meet her needs. Her view is clearly that she's been treated as little more than an employee in the relationship, just there to look after him. His view is very cynical. He thinks that she's just gone on to a new estate. This would be a symbol of the new male in her life. And it's as though even now he can only see the male as much more important than the female. He is the estate owner, while she is just earning wages. In other words, a woman is always subservient to a man from his point of view. And this brings me back to my original question. Is Armitage suggesting that all men potentially feel this way about women, or that many men do? Is this an attack on masculinity, or is he only interested in this one particular individual? Armitage uses this device of metonymy, which is a kind of metaphor where a person is symbolised through the objects related to them. So here he imagines the chambers of the other man in his ex-girlfriend's life, and that represents him. Chambers are much different from rooms. They're far grander, but they also feel much emptier. You might get a chamber in a cave, so this double meaning gives us the sense of an echoing emptiness, and we're reminded that the narrator is merely an empty echo. He is speaking a monologue here to a girl who is not there, and the reader takes the place of the girl. We feel his anger, but she is completely indifferent to it, because she never gets to hear his words. He is abandoned in the empty chambers of his prince's palace. This is metonymy. Those places represent him. We then get a stream of description that feels like a caricature. So you must picture me clueless, the brand of a steam iron on my dress shirt, as though he doesn't know how to iron because she's no longer doing it for him, and he's burnt his shirt. He's leaving the fire on all night because he's got no clue about money and making savings, and he's making the house too hot. The kitchen is not looked after, it's a scrap heap, and it's full of ring pulls from his beer cans as he drinks every night and perhaps during the day. So we have an interesting possibility here that this description is a deliberate caricature, and Armitage is pointing out that men are misunderstood. This is not actually what they're like. That's a possible interpretation. Another interpretation is this is actually what he is like, and that's one or many of the reasons that she's rejected him. However, we can feel absolutely no sympathy for this man if this is a true portrait of him. And your reading of the poem will depend on whether you think we need to sympathise with him at the end, in which case this must be a generalisation of how women can dismiss men, but they're not really like this, or if you have no sympathy for him, it could actually mean, underneath it all, this is what men are like. There is then a great irony in this line here, where he says, "The only time I came within a mile of missing you." He's not missed her at all, but he remembers it precisely as a rainy Wednesday in April. In other words, it's had a massive impact on him. Now he focuses on the emptiness of his bed. It is a big king-sizer, and now he's in there on his own and doesn't know how to get the sheets or the duvet back together again without a partner with helping hands. There is also a double entendre here where he could be referring to his penis as the big king-sizer. Again, an act of arrogance, assuming that that should be the most important thing to his partner, who he again dismisses as merely a girl. And you'll notice now that girl is appearing more frequently, tagged on the end of lines in enjambment here, to show his dismissiveness of her. Again, he dismisses her through his simile here. She and her new boyfriend are like nodding donkeys, and he disparages her through this image here. Some writers also claim that the nodding donkeys refer to oil derricks in Alaska. And this is quite an intriguing idea. Alaska was sold by the Russians as worthless and then proved to be incredibly valuable for oil. And hidden in this image then is something that he's dismissed as worthless, donkeys, turns out to be incredibly valuable, and he's just realising that now as he's lost her. The gap between them is again conveyed through the snowfield, and this image shows his frozen emotions and also how far away she is from him. He ends with this metaphor of her new romance happening under his nose, perhaps suggesting that he's still obsessed with her, following her every movement. This, of course, is made more possible because she has not moved away. She's just moved on with another partner who lives close by. Ironically, this is referred to as the Bering Strait, a narrow strip of water that separates Alaska from Russia. And so in this image, she has become Russia, massive and threatening compared to his tiny Alaska. His rage is reflected in this metaphor, a stone's throw away, the stone that he wishes to throw. But again, in this image, the stone is useless and powerless. It's not the stone that David used to slay Goliath here, which is what the narrator must hope. It's a stone that's being thrown across the Bering Strait to Russia, a far more powerful and indifferent body. And this brings us back to the idea that his rage goes unanswered. This poem is a monologue. She does not listen to him. She has nothing more to do with him, and he's powerless to make that change. It's always compulsory to consider the structure of the poem and how it reflects either the character in it or the poet's point of view. So here we can see that the structure echoes that of Hitcher. We've got 5-line stanzas here, and that's pretty consistent. In Hitcher, they were in the shape of a hand, you'll remember, as though to show the violence that he deliberately metes out to his victim. A possible interpretation here is that he is trying to impose structure on his own life that's different from this representation of what he was like, this stereotype of male incompetence. But when we look at the syllable pattern of each verse or each stanza, it's completely different. He doesn't have a pattern either for each line in the stanza, and neither does one stanza mirror the structure of another, in that they don't share the same number of syllables per line. And then I must return to the poet's point of view. Has it changed in any way? Well, I return to the title, this idea of Alaska. It's a massive state. There's a sense that this is permanent, and so the state that this man is in is also permanent, even though he's just a stone's throw away from being a different person. However, it seems that he will never achieve it. The bearing straight is always there. He is always separated from his future happiness because of his disparaging view of women. And if I want to expand that, I might consider whether Simon Armitage is saying that's true of men in general, that there is a gulf between the male view of a relationship and the female view, and perhaps this kind of split is inevitable. Alternatively, I might take the opposite point of view. Alaska has indeed been liberated from Russia and is now part of the United States. Certainly we in the Western world would see that as a distinct improvement. And so if we take that view, the narrator's hope that in the future he might change and he might make a new union, as in the United States, with another woman, this is indeed possible. However, none of the emotion in the poem and the lack of respect he shows towards this girlfriend shows that that possibility is in any way likely to happen soon.